Welcome, Tony. So thank you all for being here. I'm sure some more people are going to be coming on, but in the interest of staying close to time, I'm going to start. I'm Sue Ellen, President of Watertown Citizens. And our land acknowledgement, which we start our meetings with, I will now read. Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment acknowledges that the residents of Watertown live on land that is the traditional territory of the Pequawset people, a band of the indigenous Massachusetts tribe. Pequawset cared for and stewarded this land for hundreds of generations. The English language rendering of this name is Pigsgusset, which to the best of our knowledge means the meadows at the widening of the river. Which is also why we now have the Pigsgusset Initiative Working Group working on Indigenous issues. We recognize that Indigenous erasure and attempted genocide are still happening today, and supportive action and solidarity. Let us remember the achievements of Pigsgusset peoples and the ongoing struggles of their descendants as we reflect on how we can be good visitors and stewards of this place we call home. And just a quick message to people to make sure if your name is clear enough on your picture so that as Deborah takes minutes and notes, she can mark down exactly who's attending our meeting. And later, after the special featured presentation, if you would use the hand symbol to raise your hand if you'd like to speak. But if you're on a phone and you can't do that, just let us know and we'll figure it out how to make sure you have a chance to speak. I want to next just mention that many of you know this, but not everyone, that our former treasurer of Watertown Citizens, Ron Weber, passed away just very recently after a long illness. And Jean Trubeck, his wife, became our treasurer after Ron became ill. And I wanted to ask for a moment of silence as we remember Ron and all that he did for Watertown citizens, his contributions, and may his memory be a blessing. Thank you all. And I know Jean will let us know at some point when there will be some kind of celebration of Ron's life.
Since I'm here, maybe I should just say a couple of words about it now.
Sure.
Unless you prefer. So it'll be in the springtime. His family and mine are both spread out around the country, and it's easier to think of it at some distant, undetermined point. I've put an obit on Chergosian Funeral Home webpage, and they're going to send it to the I think to the Watertown Hatch and to the Newton Tab, but in it I ask that if people want to do something, they make a contribution to Watertown Citizens in his memory.
Oh. Wonderful, Jean. And we're all thinking of you and your family and of Ron.
And I'm thinking of Jackie and Todd.
Okay. So the next few minutes will just be some very brief updates from our working groups, not the refugee support group, since we're doing our special presentation tonight. So Tony, are you back There you are. If you want to go ahead with the update for Peace and Common Security Working Group, that would be great.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Peace and Common Security had a busy October. We coordinated and thankful to Todd for facilitating, but we coordinated a internal or for the members panel on or discussion of Ukraine and the peace movement in early October. Then we co-sponsored with some folks from Arlington and a few other groups, a presentation by Medita Benjamin in Arlington about her new book, which I'll mention again in a minute. We are having a vigil against, in favor of negotiations and against arms deployment to Ukraine on November 6th at 1 o'clock, that's Sunday. And that'll be from 1 to 2. And then we are doing the next monthly meeting, which is on the 16th at 7 o'clock. And you know that's our monthly meeting, and we'll be doing it on why critique of Israel and its apartheid policies and support for Palestinian rights is not anti-Semitic. And that'll be the theme. We have two great speakers, and that would be again on November 16th. And then they instituted, we'll put it in the e-newsletter, though I'm not sure we'll get much response, but we are starting a little book club and anybody's welcome to join us once a month when we meet, and we meet on the second Sunday of every month. We're going to use part of our meeting to discuss Medina Benjamin's book, The Ukraine War, Making Sense of a Senseless Conflict. And we'll be trying to start that off. I don't know if we'll get it all together by November 13th, which is our next meeting, but definitely by December. And that's it.
All right, thank you. It's our newest working group, and they're plowing ahead with lots of good stuff. Deborah, Watertown faces climate change. If you could give us a brief update.
Okay, well, we continue to be advocating constantly with the schools. The high school plans are running into snags because of cost overruns, and so people are very diligent in terms of watching what they're cutting, because the town does have a commitment to net zero for those schools. We want to make sure they're held to it. And the other things we're doing is we're paying attention to the comprehensive plan and strategizing about how to make sure the climate goals really get operationalized in that process. And they're starting to look at upcoming legislation in the new state legislative session.
All right, thank you. And Pam, want to give us an update on anything on Friends of Bees working group?
Sorry, you usually wait. I'm usually last. Are you coming?
You want to be last? That's okay.
No, we're cool. So with Watertown Community Gardens, we did maintenance on all of our pollinator gardens in the last couple months. So there are now 5 pollinator gardens, public pollinator gardens. There's the one at DPW headquarters, the senior center, Felipella Park. There's a new one that we just planted at Knowles Delta, which is at the intersection of, it's near Orchard and Lexington Street. And there's 2 bump outs on Boylston Street that are also very nice. So we now have 5 public pollinator gardens. And we're talking with Blue Stem Natives about doing a winter seed this winter. And And then where I'm planning to have a brainstorming session for our next Friends of Peace monthly meeting about how to go forward on making Watertown a Bee City next year.
Right. Sounds great. Jennifer, Pigs Gusset Initiative Working Group update.
Yes, thank you, Sue Ellen, and hello to everyone. I think our main activity recently was our Indigenous Peoples Day, the first celebration that we had, and it was very successful thanks to many people here and our group, our organizing group. We had it at First Parish, and it was funded by the Watertown Community Foundation. We're sort of estimating that there were about 200 people who attended. It's kind of hard to tell because it got kind of crazy at some points, but it went very well and we're very happy for it. We appreciate the proclamation from the City Council that recognized Indigenous Peoples Day, and special thanks to Nicole Gardner for helping to shepherd that through. She also arranged to have the lights on the Delta reflect colors of the medicine wheel, which is a spiritual representation to Indigenous peoples. The colors are red, yellow, white, and black. I'm not sure if they're still up, but that was kind of cool. And then the play Listen to Sipu was well received and provoked a lot of thoughtful discussion. And we're already, our next meeting is Monday, and we're planning to already starting to think about next year. So it was a great experience. There were a number of Indigenous people who joined us, and that's been really exciting. So yeah, thanks to everybody who helped out and supported us, and we'll look forward to next year.
Don't forget about the food.
Oh, right. The Chef Sherry Popnick, a Mashpee Wampanoag chef, acclaimed chef, she worked with the people at Branchline Restaurant to create some Indigenous meals or dishes, and they were really good, I have to say. And we're gonna hopefully expand on that next year and also expand on other things that we did as well. So stay tuned, and it was great. Yeah. Thank you, Sue Ellen.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer, and all those folks who worked so hard on what was a great, great celebration for the first time for Watertown. Some people who went told me, oh, how long have you guys been doing this? It's like, that was the first time. So that's pretty exciting. So is there anyone on the meeting yet from Watertown Community for Black Lives? Jackie, could you give us a brief update?
Be very brief because I can't find my notes. But what I can say is that Monday night there was Race Reels, and oh man, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was fabulous. The movie was about a woman, the person that's brought back the Wampanoag language. Whoops. Yeah. And trying to how she worked with somebody at MIT, and the movie was it was from 2011, but it was really a wonderful event. And at the end, we did a circle feedback session, and it was really positive. I know that they're also working with, they're trying to coordinate with the schools in terms of getting some things into the curriculums, as is the Pigs Gusset for diversity. And I think the next meeting is always the first Monday of the month, 6:30 to 8.
6. It starts at 6.
6 to 8.
Oh, the meetings, you mean, not the Race Reels?
Not Race Reels. No, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The next Watertown for Black Lives.
Okay.
And one of our members they had a baby recently. One of the leaders, Joseph and Aravinda, had a baby boy. It was very cute, very tiny. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. I'm sorry, I don't have better.
That's fine. So the name of the film that Wartime Communities for Black Lives showed is called We Still Live Here. And it's a wonderful documentary. You can find it online as well. And it's really moving. It's an hour long and it's a fantastic film about right in Massachusetts, the Wampanoag, and the struggles to bring their language back to life. All right, so now we have arrived at the special presentation for tonight, which is the Refugee Support Group. And we've got lots of stuff, fun stuff planned for everyone. I'll give just a brief review of kind of what the plan is. Just ask people to be muted unless you're actually presenting, and that'll be rotating around to different members of the group. And so first, I'll just give a very brief bit about the funder we just did and about how this group began. And then we'll have a couple of people will talk about how we find the families that we help, because a lot of times people ask us that question. And then you'll hear about what kinds of help we provide, both psychological needs, which Todd will speak of as a psychologist. And then others will speak about the other needs and activities and some of the stories. And then you'll have a chance to learn about legislative immigration issues that are current and what's going on and expected, and get some updates and actions. And then lastly, we'll hear a little bit about an affordable housing initiative that Mary Skinner had started. And after that, any questions or comments, discussion, Q&A will be followed. So I'll just say that I don't know how many of you were able to watch the funder Sunday night with Yo-Yo Ma, but there's a lot of feedback that it was really, really great. People were very inspired. And so far we've raised over $6,000 from that funder just that evening altogether, from people who signed up for the event. And a lot of people who were not comfortable donating electronically have said they're sending checks in. And a nice message that we got was that from Will Twombly, that the Helen Robinson Wright Fund, of which he's on their committee for that foundation, decided based on their inspiration to donate $500 to the Refugee Support Group because of the fundraising, the funder. And so just really briefly, when the group started in 2015, it was really that we were at some of our regular Watertown Citizens meetings, people were talking about how upset they were about the Syrian refugee crisis. So we thought about, well, what can we do? What should we do? And I contacted MIRA, the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, because they're always quoted in the press. They're experts. They are really at the forefront of immigration work in Massachusetts. And I ended up talking to the executive director, Ava Malona, and she offered to come to an event at the library and just present what MIRA does and what things are going on immigration, and then specifically about what's happening with Syrian refugees. So she came, and that's basically kicked us off. At the end of that meeting, people just came up to me and said, let's start a working group just on refugee and immigrant issues. And that's what we did, and started putting on educational events at the library and all kinds of interesting things, and food drives and clothing drives, and then you'll hear shortly about how we actually find out about families that we've been helping over the last 8-9 years. So I'm going to hand it over to Yola and Joan. Yola, do you want to go first?
Hi, sure.
We help.
Yeah, we have many sources that give us name of refugees and immigrant. Some friends who work for different organizations, or someone who worked for the state, who took care of the health of refugees, gave us some names of families that we helped after. And Rand also worked for an organization, and she came and she was with us for a while before she moved to Texas. Also, she gave us a lot of names for refugees and asylum seekers. My friend from Worcester, she works for an organization also there. They were taking care of, they work with DCF Central. They were taking care of a woman with 4 children. She has an abusive husband, and they wanted to look for an organization that would take over because they couldn't help her anymore. So, and she also came and met with us a couple of times here in my house when we used to have in-person meetings. So she asked me if we can meet her and if we can take care of her. So we've been taking care of her since. Also, John provided so many.
Yeah.
You can talk about the Catholic Charities and other.
I think the inspiration for me to become involved was our own parish collaborative, the Social Justice Committee. And back in 2016, we started working with Catholic Charities with their Power program, where groups got together to adopt families coming in. So in 2017, our collaborative, working with other churches of different denominations in Belmont, we helped, we adopted a family from the Congo first, and then a family from Iran. And we still keep in touch. The family from Iran, we were able to resettle in Belmont because one of our parishioners dropped the rent so they could afford to be here in Belmont, and they're still here. They're neighbors. And we also got referrals personally from other resettlement agencies like Ascentria and International Institute of New England. Families, I've personally worked directly with 11 families from the Congo, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan, Colombia. More recently, a referral for a family from Peru, and also beginning to work again with Catholic Charities with people coming in from the Ukraine. And the Belmont Religious Council, what we're planning on doing very shortly is we're already started setting up welcome circles for Ukrainian refugees coming in. And that's a whole different ball game because they're not coming in through any resettlement agency. There's a whole different process by the US government, which will mean the people who have to sponsor the Ukrainians will have a lot more responsibility. But besides the refugee resettlement agencies, one of the families, the one from Colombia, was referred directly to me by a phone call from the Office for Housing Stability in Somerville. That was the family from Colombia. Let me see. I also have found that people who've arrived here, like the people who came in from Iran, they knew of somebody who had been in Iran longer than they found out when she was coming in. And she came in 2020. in the middle of the, the crisis with the pandemic, and there was no place for her to live. So she actually lived with me for 20 months.
We all wondered how they could communicate since.
Sorry?
We always wondered how you could communicate all that time when you took in this refugee.
Right.
Didn't speak each other's languages at all.
Let's see, I have some more. Yes. People from, I've been in touch recently with 2 families from the Ukraine. One was referred to me actually by the Belmont Human Rights Commission. Both families are now living in Waltham. So I'm doing that kind of on my own rather than through an agency. We do a lot of, I had other referral sources too. The other refugee support groups, I got in touch with, different families through them. And a lot of what we do, is first of all, the most urgent need is housing, and it's the most difficult need. And also put families and individuals in touch with Mass Health and set up primary care doctors, etc. Register kids in school, put them in touch with the state agencies, and with legal agencies. And also those who've been here for a number of years, there's work to do with immigration, helping them, apply for permanent residence and citizenship. And a very big part of it is community integration, like befriending them and introducing them to other families, as part of our Watertown Citizens Refugee Support Group, bringing families together so they can network. Obviously, we also help them with job searches. And another important one also is banking and financial counseling. So it definitely takes a town or a group of churches. One person couldn't do everything for any particular family. So we have to collaborate with different groups and different individuals. And the most recent referral I got for the family from Peru came from a different church here in Belmont. The family showed up at the church and they are undocumented and they just need to know how to get in touch with legal assistance, etc. But anyway, I think our work going forward is really going to be cut out for us with so many people coming in from the Ukraine with the conditions they're getting worse. So, thank you.
One more thing, I think now the organization has been known in Watertown and the surrounding towns. So we got families just from the website online. Someone, Liza, I think, just asked one time because she has a family from, Guatemala. And she was asking on the website. So I told her we had the meeting at that night. So I told her, if you like, you can come to the meeting and we can talk to them. And so they all came and that's how we met them.
Right, yeah.
So different ways of meeting people or getting to know them.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Sometimes it's literally word of mouth. And sometimes it's, as Joan was describing, the different agencies that we can work with and contact. And sometimes it's through religious organizations, including a group of synagogues in Newton that started sponsoring families and needing help. And so it just is an ongoing mess, surprise. We never quite know where it's going to always come from. But we have no shortage of people looking for help for families. And so I think now it's time to turn things over to Todd, and then Jackie Ann, and I don't think Naomi's going to make it on tonight, but to tell us more about the specific things that we do and some of the stories of some of the families that we help in specific ways.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? First of all, I just want to say it is a pleasure to work with the people you see on the screen here. They're amazing, they're dedicated, and the work is wonderful. You're going to hear a lot of things about what are some of the services we try to provide for the people coming. But what I want to focus on a little bit is the psychological aspects of what we do. And it's connected because these services also need a lot of psychological needs anyway that we do, but the human part. And I think, one of the functions that I've realized in the work we do is that a lot of times we're some of the first people to really greet these people. So you think about how important when you greet people it is, and thinking that these are families, many of them coming from situations where they needed to flee danger, where they may have been traumatized by violent actions, witnessed destruction and death in their communities, been forced to flee, leave everything they know, and what would we feel like if that happened to us? Well, strikes me that we would be faced with feelings of uncertainty because we don't know what's next in our life, coming to a new country, fear, sadness of the loss, anxiety about what's going to happen, anger at some of the things that were done to us in our country, and maybe distrust of people. So it means that there's a lot of psychological needs that are coming along with the very practical physical needs that are also important. So then I started to think about what are some of the things I think are important that happen that I've noticed as we've all tried to work with the people. One of the concepts is the need for empathy. Our ability to try to put ourselves in the place of these people and what would we feel like if we were coming to a country where we don't know the language, we don't know people, we don't know, maybe have different values and customs. Also, in order to be empathic, I think part of what we're doing is trying to be good listeners, to really pay attention to what people are saying, listen to what their feelings are, not be judgmental, and most importantly, and it's almost intangible, but you feel it the families have told us they feel us, to be caring, to be kind, to be respectful of them. And part of being respectful is to realize that these are not just, quote, refugees. They're not a label. They're human beings who had a life and skills, friends and families in the country they came from. They have a whole identity. So the more we're respectful to those aspects, I think that sets a good tone. The people also, Joan mentioned this, it also helps if they can meet other people that have had similar experiences or share the same language, people to talk with, to network, who are going through the same kind of process. And in our work, some of the things that have really made a difference is like the recent picnics. We've had dinners sometimes, and it is amazing to see and very exciting to watch the faces of the people when they recognize people that speak their language or really share some of the same values. So we try to make these connections for the people. And what was interesting listening on the Yo-Yo Ma fundraiser, so a couple people really made a reference to the fact that what we mean to the people when we approach them with kindness and resources and help is we almost have another family here in America. And that's part of us being the greeters. And one of the teenagers that talked on the table, was wonderful, talked about that it's kind of a process. In the beginning, they need us a lot for a lot of different things, including the psychological things I'm saying and the other things you're going to hear. And then as they sort of get towards, you know, on their own feet a little bit. They need us a little less, but they still they consider us very important friends, and they still want us to be around, in a sense, in a family. So I think what we do is try to provide that feeling of, we are here for you, we will back you. But we also try to balance that with a sense of respecting their need for independence. So the metaphor that struck me about what we do is we try to open doors for people, but then we stand back and cheer as they walk through, whether they get their citizenship, whether they get their jobs, whatever the things are they get. But that seems to be an important part. And lastly, I think I want to say just a couple things that stood out to me that I'll never forget from being involved in this wonderful group. And that is, again, with that teenager that talked, we had an evening a long time ago in a church where several families got together. And this wonderful young woman spoke about the experiences they had in Syria, where there was a bombing and the father was almost left for dead, for sure. And eventually he came to the United States, was rehabilitated to some extent with still some problems. But as she told the story of what the whole family went through, Jackie and I had tears in our eyes. And she came over after she finished talking towards the end, and she said to us, you know, we saw your I saw your tears, and you have no idea what it means to know that people in this country care about what we've gone through. And that stayed with me. And then she also talked about, and I thought this was interesting, the first time, once she got into a school system in Massachusetts, the teacher asked her to write, the class assignment was to write an essay about your opinion about something. And she said, in my country, if I express my opinion, I could go to jail. I can't speak. And she made the point to us, which is important to reflect on in the work we do, that we really have to not take for granted the freedom that we do have, and understand what a dose of that means for people who have been so constrained and not had it. So I think, you know, these are some of the psychological things. By the way, people were mentioning the food a few times, and sharing foods not only gives people a chance to show what they've done in their culture, what's important to them, but it also connects people. It's something we can all unite around, and we love the taste of all the different foods. And I think we're trying to also learn from the people we work with a taste of what their culture and their feelings are. So for me, it's an honor to do this work and to work with these families. And if there's one last thing I would leave you with, is that I think another extremely important psychological function that we all do in our different ways, in this committee and in all the committees, especially for people coming from other countries, is we give them hope. Hope is a very important commodity. We give them a chance to see that there is a path for them to develop a new life despite incredible difficulties they've gone through. And I just feel so lucky to be a part of that. And I thank all the people we work together too.
Thank you, Todd. Beautifully put.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
So I want to address a little, although Yola and Joan have talked about things that we've done, what the kinds of ways that we get involved with people. You know, the obvious thing is we help them with money, which is why we had to do the fundraiser. So that's kind of, but then you get into the more physical need, you know, the items, the things that they need. And so we get specific asks, so that one of the members of the group will get one of the families that they're working with, I need a bureau, I need a desk, I need to get one of the kids that's starting school in the fall needed to have a COVID test. And, you know, so there are a lot of like last minute things. So we ran over and brought them COVID tests so that they could be able to go to school. One of the families that we work with was having issues in their apartment where the air didn't seem, there were like pieces of things flying around in the air. So we wound up finding an air filter system for them to put up in their home. Kitchen supplies, that seems to be, that's something that we do a lot of. Kitchen towels, sheets, and as I know Diane's going to laugh at this because at the fundraiser, the fellow kept talking about boots, you know. But in fact, you know, we get a frantic call. It's snowing and I need to go out, and you know, so we either take them to buy them the boots or we find a pair of boots for them. So it's very much it's not. There's no set things that people come to us for. We sometimes people that will be placed someplace and they need to move. So we either help them move, help them pack up. That's a way. Food, we'll get a call. There's a food pantry in Waltham that are serving Ugandan families. So we have a Ugandan family that needs food, so we take them there. We need clothes for school, we'll take them shopping. So that's the kind of, it's very much last minute kind of stuff. Anne often does tutoring, and it's very often with some of the families. One family in particular that I worked with, they had a baby, and I'm an early intervention, and I love working with babies, and the calling out that somebody needed some support around the baby, so I would go and visit with her. But while there, things might come up like the dentist is calling, and we might have to do an intervention, you know, help them make sure they get the right dental care, or they might be given an instruction and they don't understand quite what that is. And so we clarify that. That's a lot of what we wind up doing. Let's see. Very often, and Jones kind of mentioned this, and you'll as well, they might need help advocating for the kids. So we had one little one child where they needed help navigating with the public school to get special services for their child. So we worked with the family and we work with the schools, so that it's so varied. There's not just one way. We get people lawyers, and we intervene with the lawyers when we can. Let's see what else. I think so. It's and the connecting families with each other. I'm going to turn this over to who's next? Anne. I think Anne was going to talk about some of her families.
You need to unmute, Anne.
She's muted.
My audio. Okay, here I am. Yeah, I'd like to tell you about some families, a couple of families that we've helped. And they're wonderful success stories, I think. I mean, they're in the past mostly. We don't help them much anymore because they're pretty independent. But when they got here, they needed a lot of things, and we stepped in and helped them. One of the families is from Mexico, and the other one is from Haiti. So the first one, the Mexico family, Larissa, Carlos, and Mateo, Larissa is the mom, Carlos is the father, and Mateo is was about three years old when he came. He's I think he's in the first grade now. He's doing really well. I tutored him last year in reading because his teacher said he couldn't keep up with the American kids in the class. And he told me today that he's getting all good grades and that, you know, things have turned around for him. So I'm very happy for him. This family was asylum seekers from Mexico. When they came, they ran a little bodega in Chihuahua and they were being shaken down regularly by gangs. And they just decided it wasn't worth it. It was a little dangerous and, well, quite dangerous, really. So they fled to Arizona and were adopted more or less by a lawyer and his daughter who lived in Newton. And they got the family to move to Newton and fostered them until they were able to find agencies like ours to help them along their way. So what we did was, well, I tutored them in English, of course, and in reading, but also the Watertown Support Group found housing for them, and they helped the family move to an apartment in Waltham. Larissa wanted to make dinner for everyone right after they finished moving, because they moved them to the 3rd floor, and the stairs were narrow, and it was quite a lot of work. Unfortunately, COVID intervened before they could have them over for dinner, and she had to send tamales wrapped in tinfoil to the various people to eat it at their homes. And another thing we did was we found bikes for them, because as you know, none of these people can drive yet. They're all hoping that they will be able to drive next year, but for now they can't drive. So that's why we have to give them rides to so many places. So we found the family 3 bikes and they were very happy with that. And they have been out riding quite a bit. And last year we really got lucky because a church decided to rent to them instead of renting for much higher money, higher amounts, and using that to fix their roof. They decided it was more important to help the immigrants. So they took in this family, and another church in Norwood paid most of their rent. The rest of it was raised by groups like ours. And this church is really, the apartment is lovely. It's got several rooms, so they've got their own rooms. And it's centrally located, it's near stores and so forth that they can get to. And the landlords, if you can call them that, the church people, like the family so much because they help each other out. You know, the family does some cooking for some of their events, and the father helps them with landscaping and things like that. So they have decided, the church people have offered them to extend their lease for longer. We're all really happy about that. And I guess I should say Mateo is playing soccer and taking piano lessons. His mom is learning to do hair braiding and fingernail polishing. So someday she'll be able to paint people's nails and so forth. And the dad, as I mentioned, does yard work, but he also has painted a few houses for friends and done some other handyman chores. So that's the Mexican family, very dear to my heart. The second group is also pretty close to me because they actually lived down the street from me for quite a while. Jean-Jerome Charleston is an asylum seeker originally from Haiti. He came to the United States in 2017. I met him through a lawyer who was a friend of a friend in my church. So sometimes these people come across in other ways than agencies. Jean-Jerome had been a lawyer in Haiti. He was a whistleblower and he had to go into hiding. His son was kidnapped at one point. His son must have been pretty young at that time because he's 10 now, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. Eventually the boy was returned, but it was a scary place, and Jean-Jerome felt like he had to get out. So his sister took care of the children. Jean-Jerome came to the United States. He made friends with this other lawyer who lives in Newton, and he found him a temporary place to live in Dorchester, but it was a one-room apartment. And when his children were allowed to come to the United States to join him, he clearly needed a larger place and hopefully a safer place. He spoke to John Tenner, who is his American contact, and John Tenner talked to us, and Sue Ellen in particular, but others also helped find him a very nice place right across from the Boys and Girls Club at Hamilton Place. And they were there for quite a while. The children were able to go there after school because Jean Jerome was a single parent, so he didn't have anybody to look after the kids. He would have had to hire a babysitter. So we helped out with some of the tuition at the Boys and Girls Club, particularly during the vacation time and the summer vacation, summer camp. And the kids, you know, they have swimming there and crafts, a lot of different activities, basketball, I think. Arvon has gotten to be quite a sports guy, an athlete. And let me see, what else do I want to tell you about them? They've actually moved out of the place in Hamilton Place to another place on Pleasant Street. I'm not sure why, but it seems to me it's a sign that they're doing well, that they were able to look for another place. Jean Jerome has a full-time job working for IINE, which is International Institute of New England. And his job is to go around and help immigrants to find benefits, services that they can get, you know, like WIC and SNAP and so forth. And he says it's long hours and can be pretty frustrating, but he's glad he's doing it because he's helping so many people that were at one time as needy as he is. Before this, he actually worked in another capacity for Partners in Health during the COVID pandemic. He had to trace people that had gotten COVID and find out, you know, who they had seen and where they'd gone and so forth. But I think that this is a better job for him now, going downtown, even though he is away from home. And these are my stories about the immigrant families who have been helped by the Watertown Refugee Support Group. We're very happy to have witnessed and supported their growth and success.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Good stories. And actually, we are still helping them. We just paid recently for the kids to go to camp this past summer. Mm-hmm. It's just really difficult for them not to be able to be there while their dad's working so hard. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to turn things over to Diane and Mary to talk to us about legislative immigration issues. You're muted, Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane, and I'm going to talk to you about some state and federal legislation. But I think I want to underscore that we should really remember the stories that people have been telling us, because this legislation does affect real people, real families who are fleeing war and violence, economic oppression, and it really does have an impact on their life. So my stuff is a little drier compared to other people's information. The first thing I'm not going to spend a lot of time with, because I'm sure you're all very much aware of, is the Family Mobility Act, which is question 4 on the ballot in November, which would give undocumented Massachusetts residents driver's licenses so that they can drive illegally. They would get a Mass state ID, driver's license, not a real ID. They'd have to take a test, physical and written, and also carry insurance, which makes it safer for all of us. And that way they can leave their homes and do their daily tasks of going to work, taking their kids to school, going to doctor appointments, etc., and not be fearful that they're going to be stopped because they are driving without a license. So this will give them some security, not total security, but at least it will allow them to go about their daily life and not be fearful of being pulled over and not having a driver's license. So please vote yes on ballot question 4 in November. There are state guideline books that came out that are read that tell you about all the issues, and unfortunately this issue was not addressed because there was a referendum on the ballot initiative and it was passed after the books were printed. So you're not going to find any printed information in those red booklets that you might receive in the mail. The next thing I want to talk to you about is another state program called RAF. That's an acronym, and it stands for Rental Assistance for Families in Transition. We had federal government programs, SHEER and ERAP, during the COVID pandemic at the height of it to help people with federal funds. Those applications have been stopped since April of 2022, and now the state is continuing to do their work through the program called RAFT. So this will help people prevent them from becoming homeless due to loss of job, rent increase, utility increases, cost of moving, tenant, security deposits, etc. People can get up to $10,000 worth of assistance for up until 2023 of June of 2023, and they can get this assistance whether or not they are documented or not in this country. RAFT also provides free legal assistance and pre-court types of mediation services to prevent evictions. So if someone is in the process of getting RAFT, they need to keep their court date with the judge and just explain that they're in the process of getting rental assistance through RAFT. There's also a program for homeowners, and this is for people who earn 150% of the area median income and have not been able to make payments on their mortgage for 3 months. So to prevent foreclosure, they can apply for half, and the payments will be made either directly to the bank or their mortgage company. And again, people can apply for that online as well. Now I just want to tell you a few things about acts that are affecting Afghan refugees. There's the Afghan Adjustment Act that was kind of folded into the continued resolution bill to fund the federal government up until December 15th. That bill, the primary hallmark part of that bill would have given Afghan parolees who are here for 2 years a path to permanent citizenship. Unfortunately, the bill did not pass. The bill failed to get enough votes in the Senate due to Republican members not feeling comfortable because the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the Border Patrol, and the National Counterterrorism Center reported that they didn't have enough data to completely vet Afghans who are here and rule out whether or not they were a terrorist threat. So even though the bill had language to increase vetting. So the two things so right now that means there's currently no path for citizenship for Afghan parolees who are only allowed to be in this country for 2 years. As you might recall, Biden pulled the troops out around last September, and people started arriving here in December. So they already have 1 year of their 2 years of parole is almost up. So if there's nothing done, they will have to leave the country in 2 years, which is very dangerous for them. So the two things that did pass in this bill was $3 billion was funded to help Afghans who are here now to get this types of services that they need while they're still here, and it's codified that they need to be here for 2 years. Senator Lindsey Graham, who co-sponsored the bill, believes that there can be a pathway to citizenship for Afghan parolees in the upcoming National Defense Authorization Bill or an omnibus spending bill if the criteria for vetting is even more stringent. I received an email letter from Senator Markey recently because I called asking him to support the Afghan Adjustment Act, which he did do. And he said in his letter that he's going to ask President Biden to extend temporary protective status to Afghans who are here in the United States. This would give them another option should their parole end, as long as they meet the requirements to satisfy temporary protective status. He's also going to ask President Biden to increase the number of people who are allowed to come into the country from 100,000 to 200,000. So let's see. The next thing I want to talk to you about pertaining Afghans is that in February of this year, President Biden froze $7 billion of Afghan foreign assets in this country that the Afghan people or the Afghan government cannot access. On August 26th, Judge Sarah Netburn from the Southern District of New York ruled that he cannot do this, that it's not legal for him to use Afghan assets. He wanted half of the assets to be used to compensate families of 9/11 victims. So she had 3 reasons for stating why these funds cannot be used to compensate the families of 9/11 victims. The reasons are that the Central Afghan Bank is immune to jurisdiction from the Southern District Court of New York and any United States courts whatsoever. The second reason is an act for compensating families of 9/11 victims with frozen Afghan assets through the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act of 2002 called TRIA would imply that the United States recognizes the Taliban as the official government of Afghanistan, which is something only a US president can do. And the third reason, under TRIA, the US cannot mobilize Afghan assets since the relationship between the Taliban and the Afghan Central Bank was not consensual, but the bank was taken over by force. So as a result, I'm not quite sure if as a result of her recommendations or not, on September 14th, the Biden administration announced that they will unfreeze $3.5 billion of foreign assets belonging to Afghanistan and created a trust fund in the Bank of International Settlement in Switzerland to benefit the Afghan people. So this fund will be managed by an international board of trustees and will be shielded from the Taliban. The main purpose of the fund is to promote monetary and macroeconomic stability for the people of Afghanistan. So money will be spent on critical imports like electricity, covering debt payments, and other things like that in order to preserve Afghan eligibility for development assistance in the future. Humanitarian groups are urging that the remaining $3.5 billion be given away to help relieve the famine that's going on in Afghanistan right now. So that's all the news I have about Afghanistan. I do have a DACA update. On October 5th, 2022, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans questioned the legality of DACA and returned it back to its lower court in Texas for review of the Biden administration's revisions of DACA because a lower court Texas judge on July 2021 had said that DACA was illegal. And as a result of the lower court's ruling, all new applications for DACA were halted. Anybody who had an anniversary date of a year or more since July 16, 2021. If they hadn't already applied for DACA, they could not reapply. And anybody under whose application may be expired just within 1 year of July 2021 could apply for renew their DACA. So this put a lot of people in turmoil. They didn't really know what to do. DACA, so the Texas court has to now review Biden's changes to DACA. So again, at this point in time, people who currently hold DACA are safe. People who have DACA that has expired less than 1 year can reapply. People whose DACA expired for more than 1 year will be they can apply, but it will be looked upon as a new applicant or initial application, and it will be taken in, but it will not be processed. So there are some minor changes to DACA under the Biden administration new rules, but the program pretty much remains the same. People can apply for deferred action if they want to, which means protection for deportation, but they don't have to apply for work permit if they don't want to. So it's basically the same program. And it's expected that this decision about the legality of DACA will probably go to the Supreme Court. So there's the solution is that Congress has to act. There are two acts that Congress could and should pass. The first is the Dream and Promise Act, which would provide a pathway to citizenship for DACA and TPS holders. The House passed this bill in March of 2021, but the Senate never acted on it. Second is the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021, which could provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented and dreamers and all of the 11 million people living in the United States without any status. The Biden administration tried to protect DACA and pass significant immigrant legislation reform in the Build Back Better bill, but that never passed. So that's what's going on with DACA right now. I would like to end, I do have some positive news, which is that the Biden administration has a new definition for the public charge rule. So because of this, people can get benefits that they were legally entitled to, but were too afraid to apply for. So on September 8th, 2022, the Biden administration published a new federal regulation redefining the meaning of public charge, which is currently going to take effect on December 23rd, 2022. And right now, any decisions regarding public charge will be using these new guidelines. The Trump administration used the specter of being a public charge to frighten the immigrant community so they would not apply for benefits that they were legally entitled to because they feared that this would be used against them when they wanted to apply for a green card or citizenship. Being a public charge is part of an immigration test used to determine who can be granted a visa or a green card. People can be denied access to the United States if they're likely to become a public charge and rely on the United States government as their primary source of support. However, there are many exemptions to the public charge test. So people who are have adjusting statuses such as asylees, refugees, special immigrant juveniles, victims of crimes, which is a U visa holder, survivors of trafficking, which is T visa holders, women who are self-petitioning to the Violence Against Women Act, or those who are applying for DACA, TPS, or citizenship are not subject to the public charge test. The new regulations consider someone to be a public charge only under 2 conditions. One is financial. So only if they are relying on the US government for cash assistance in terms of Social Security, or TANF, which is temporary assistance for needy families, or general assistance. The other criterion is if they need long-term institutional care that the US government would pay for. Most individuals who apply for green cards are not eligible for this type of assistance in the first place. So all other benefits such as SNAP, which is food stamps, school lunch programs, WIC, rental assistance, healthcare, pandemic relief, unemployment, and housing assistance are not considered a public charge test, and they don't affect immigrant applications. So the new regulations will likely face legal challenges, but the Biden administration followed the right notice and comment procedure, which they didn't do with DACA, to issue this regulation so that it will be on solid legal ground and in line with policy that has largely been in place in 20 years. So basically, it's kind of restored the public charge definition prior to Trump and taken away the negative effects of public charge. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much, Diane. That's
Thank
a
you.
lot of stuff to digest, but a lot of stuff that's been happening nationally. Mary, it's your turn.
Yes, I have a couple more things to add. And Diane, that was amazing. We've been working on this together for a while. I'm going to speak about the refugees that were sent to Martha's Vineyard, and then about the Mexican protection, Mexican whatever policy, the return to Mexico policy. On 9/20, the Lawyers for Civil Rights and Alianza Americas, a network of nonprofits, filed a class action lawsuit against Governor Ron DeSantis and the Transportation Secretary of Florida for enticing 48 Venezuelan refugees under false pretenses to fly from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard. The goals of this civil suit are compensation for violations of their civil rights and to prevent vulnerable refugees from future exploitation. The lawyers found these refugees in mental and emotional distress when abandoned, and can you imagine, on an isolated island far from the court hearings set by immigration officials when they surrendered at the border. The lawsuit describes the crime and poverty in Venezuela that forced many families to walk to the southern US border. It details the false promises that enticed them to board the flight, their imprisonment during the flight, and their sense of abandonment when their guides disappeared immediately on landing. Fortunately, the year-round people of Martha's Vineyard and Massachusetts generally welcomed them. A woman called Perla approached them in Texas with promises of jobs, education, and financial help if they would fly north, supposedly to Washington, D.C. or Boston. They assigned not fully translated documents and were whisked off to a hotel so they were unable to check the legitimacy of the deal. On the plane, they were given impressive folders containing more false promises. And when they arrived on Martha's Vineyard after dark, with no advance notice for their care, those who escorted them fled. The lawsuit claims at least 12 violations of their constitutional rights and seeks damages for emotional turmoil, deception, detainment, and transportation across state borders. Furthermore, as you probably know, Governor DeSantis deflected $12 million of COVID relief funds to the transport of immigrants north. Vertol Systems that flew the planes to Martha's Vineyard were paid $615,000, more than $12,000 for each immigrant. Vertol was also paid $915,000 2 weeks later for mysterious projects 2 and 3 that are yet to come. A criminal investigation has been instigated by Sheriff Salazar of Bexar County, that is San Antonio in Texas. Meanwhile, more than 7,000 migrants have been bused north from Texas and Arizona to Washington, D.C. since April. Governor Abbott of Texas has spent almost $2 million per month on this. Other refugees have been bused to New York City and Chicago, exhausting their resources to care for the immigrants. The Southern governors continue to make the point that border states cannot shoulder the full burden of refugees entering the US from the South. Immigrants forced to remain in Mexican border towns since the Trump era have been subject to crime, violence, and sordid living conditions. On June 30th, the Supreme Court allowed the Biden administration to end the Trump-era migrant protection protocols, which required those seeking US asylum to remain in Mexico. However, the MPP, or Return to Mexico policy, seems to be ending very slowly. In July, a Texas court issued an injunction keeping the program in place. This was recently lifted by a judge in Amarillo, allowing the Department of Homeland Security to end MPP, quote, in a quick and orderly manner. No new immigrants seeking asylum may be enrolled in MPP, and all will be disenrolled at the time of the next asylum hearing, when they may remain in the US until the settlement of their cases. However, no new asylum seekers are allowed into the US until their first hearings. Given the backlog of cases and long waits for hearings, few new immigrants have actually been permitted into the US yet, reported by the American Immigration Lawyers Association on 10/7. Finally, the very limited extension of humanitarian parole for 2 years offered by the Biden administration on 10/13 to Venezuelan asylum seekers may result in unqualified Venezuelans in the US being returned to Mexico. As in the new Ukrainian humanitarian parole policy, Venezuelans seeking asylum from outside the US must have a qualified sponsor willing to support them for the 2 years they are here, and are admitted to the US only on a case-by-case basis. Venezuela now has the largest humanitarian crisis in the world after Syria and the Ukraine, with 7 million people desperately in need internally and 6 million dispersed abroad, according to an International Rescue Committee report. However, they may not find the personal sponsorship here that many Ukrainians and Afghanis have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, it's a lot to swallow. So our last few minutes, Mary is just going to share with us a bit about an affordable housing initiative that she started and kind of where that is headed.
We're kind of using up our speaking time, I'm afraid. But yes, I'll call it Affordable Housing Now. It's one of several proposed initiatives for the Refugee Support Group in the future. And I'm going to speak about it. The primary responsibility, of course, of RSG remains and continues to be the assisting of refugees recommended to us, of which you'd heard such good stuff. One of the major barriers we face is finding less expensive housing, especially in our area. The average apartment in New York may cost now $5,000 per month, but here a good apartment is often over $2,000. Families with 2 full-time workers starting out in the US may be able to afford $1,000 or maybe $1,500 a month, but this is a large chunk of their income and often requires postponing needed medical, dental, or nutritional expenses. Public outrage over the rental situation, especially as it affects poor, disadvantaged Black and brown families and newcomers, is growing. Watertown has just appointed 6 residents with housing experience to form with the city manager an affordable housing trust, quote, to find and engage in real estate activities to develop and preserve housing for income qualified families, end of quote. They will identify sites for building new units, locate affordable housing developers, and work for needed zoning changes. Hopefully, other Boston areas and towns are doing the same. The yes in my backyarders are beginning to outnumber the NIMBYs of yesteryear. Last year, a new subcommittee of RSG met several times to consider the desperate local needs for more affordable housing. One of our members presented a proposal called Green Line Homes that might assist willing landlords in remodeling their homes to provide new apartments that then they can rent below market price, and it will be partially funded by donations. It was a bit complicated, and we've moved on to research and discuss other solutions like the following 6, and I'm sure there may be many more. Number 1, what is the affordable housing situation in communities around us, and what is being proposed to ameliorate serious shortages? 2, what zoning changes are required to convert one-family homes, garages, or outbuildings to offer more inexpensive housing options? 3, what work is already being done by other nonprofits like Haley House in the South End to provide affordable housing for the poor and recently homeless? 4, large developers are often required to build affordable housing as a part of their projects. Local officials may require a developer to enter into a community benefits agreement so local citizens have a say in meeting the needs of their less advantaged. This may be an option for Somerville or Dorchester. Is it applicable in places like, in towns like ours around Boston? 5, perhaps we could form alliances with communities outside Boston where we have excellent contacts to help willing refugees move to cities with affordable rents. And we would help them find the services, jobs, and support they need to get started in the US. And 6, we understand there may be rental networks to help students and young people find less expensive and shared apartments. What about such networks to help refugees and others who need them? We look forward to our discussions of affordable housing and to moving on to take action. We would welcome your help and participation if you'd like to join us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mary. And thanks to everyone for their contributions to our presentation. I see a couple questions in the chat about, Holly was asking, is Haiti not recognized because of the size of the country? I'm not sure which kind of recognition you're asking about, Holly. You're talking about DACA or TPS or which?
The countries that were just recognized as, I think, Syria, that you said were in the worst humanitarian crisis. Haiti is under siege. It's being controlled by gangs right now.
That's true.
I see what you mean. It's not, yeah, it's hard to say where the worst is going on.
Yeah, well, the gas prices in Haiti, it's like you would be paying $20,000 here.
Yep.
They're asking people to pay.
Or get shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really grim. And Jean wrote about it in Yemen. And I think a lot of us are aware too, Yemen is a disaster.
Yeah.
People are just suffering really, really, really badly. And of course now of Nigerian floods, I mean, just the world is a mess in so many places. It's really hard. So here we are just doing what we can in Watertown, Belmont, Arlington, just in our corner of the world, doing the best we can. So to close out, I'll just mention that as we're moving towards in-person things being more possible and the library being open now for events, we'll be kind of strategizing over these next months what might we like to do in terms of other programs like we used to do in the past, whether it's films or invited guest speakers or maybe an art exhibit that we had wanted to do a while ago of a Syrian artist husband or partner who was killed. So there's a lot of interesting ideas, and it's going to be fun. It'll be fun and exciting to pick up those threads of what might we like to do besides the everyday kind of helping of families that is obviously very tricky. And I see a question, what about affordable housing for refugees? I think I think the program that Mary was describing is not just for asylum seekers or whatever, it's more inclusive. for documented and undocumented folks. So I think that concludes our program, and we have a little bit of time. If people have questions or comments you want to make, now is the time to do that. And I just want to mention that I personally have to get off at 8:30 because I have to be somewhere. But if people want to continue talking, feel free to do that. And other folks can kind of take charge. So any comments? Feel free to raise your electronic hand or your regular hand or whatever you like.
Looks like Holly has a question, so.
Yeah, Holly, see your hand up.
Yep. So Martha's Vineyard is trying to start a housing bank. I'm a family liaison in the Watertown Public Schools, and I work with Spanish-speaking families. We are in desperate need of healthcare professionals that speak Spanish and Portuguese. And I don't have a lot of time, but I am definitely interested in working with the group that's trying to think about housing. Just a network of people who, you know, we can present it as, here's a great way to make an extra $1,000 a month. You know, it's a mutually great situation. I have one room from my church that's been great for emergency situations, but the emergency situation has turned into a permanent situation. So I no longer have an emergency go-to when there's a family that's in dire need of housing. So just a list of people, you know, I heard some lovely stories about landlords lowering rent. I mean, if there's a way to organize a network around that, I would be happy to participate.
That'd be great, Holly. Some of you don't know this, but Holly's already been helping behind the scenes and in the scenes with some of the families that we've been mutually trying to take care of, and whom she knows more intimately through their children who are in the schools. But it's been great. So yeah, so Mary, it's another possible.
Yes, I'm getting your name down. I'm squinting to get the whole name here.
CACHIM. I'll put it in the chat. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Sure. So any other comments and questions from people? We're sort of wrapping up. All right, well, thank you all very much for being here, and I'm sorry we didn't have more people besides the ones that are showing on the screen, but it's hard to predict attendance at our meetings. And, but great work, everyone, and we'll just carry on.
Thank you for your leadership, Sue Ellen.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Sue Ellen, for all you do. Everybody, everybody's putting their hearts and souls into this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We have a great group of people.
Yes.
So
it's been very rewarding.
All right. So I'm gonna close out myself and